Joining us now is the man behind that auction. Dave Magers is the CEO of Mecum. And, you know, Dave, to Hannah's point, Kissimmee really kicked off this massive month. I think over $1 billion in collector cars traded hands in the month of January alone. What do you make of the vibe shift with the Enzo going for $18 million and the GTO going for only $38?
Well, good to see you again, Matt. Thanks for having me on this morning. Certainly, Kissimmee was quite a spectacle. I wouldn't say that we expected what we saw. We did expect that Kissimmee was going to be a monumental event for us, but maybe not at the levels that it has actually turned out to be. And I think there are really two stories in Kissimmee. Of course, everyone wants to talk about the 1962 250 GTO that sold for $38.5 million, and the other huge spectacle, the Bachmann collection of 46 Ferraris and a couple of other cars and a motorcycle that brought a little over $120 million. But if you look at Kissimmee in total, and with some post-auction sales, we're close to the $460 million range, which broke our old record for the most sales at a collector car auction of $260 million. So a considerable achievement. But what I think is more important is if you take the 250 GTO out of the mix, out of the sales totals, and if you take the Bachmann cars out of the sales totals, Kissimmee auction was still $300 million, still another record setter, surpassing our $260 million record that we had set before. So I think, yes, we had the one-offs. We had the great collection that, you know, probably most collectors aren't going to see in a lifetime in the Bachmann collection. You don't take a 250 GTO to auction every day. But I think the more telling story is what the rest of Kissimmee meant to where we think the collector car hobby is going.
Well, Dave, just kind of on that point, I'm told, as by Hannah Elliott, as it just so happens, that Mecum had been known for selling volume of maybe more low-end Mustangs and that sort of thing. Your ability...
Kudos.
Okay, thank you, Matt, for that. I did not know that. But your ability to get these sales, these auctions, where we're talking about multiple millions, tens of $millions, does it represent a shift for Mecum as a whole?
It may look like that from the outside, but we've always been in that business. You know, we've sold cars for $7, $8, $9, $10 million previously, but we are also in the volume business. We're also in the American, you know, muscle car business. Typically, like everyone else, we have loaded up our Monterey docket in August with some of the higher end cars. And as you know, pretty much all the auction companies are doing the same thing in Monterey. So we're competing with events, we're competing with other auction companies, we're competing for a limited number of high net worth buyers when we go to Monterey. But we made a decision several years ago. I don't know if you are familiar with the book from the 90s called Blue Ocean Strategy. The context of the book is you can compete in a bloody red ocean, or you can create your own pristine blue ocean. And we made a conscious decision that we were going to create our own blue ocean, our own high-end auction in Kissimmee, rather than loading up the Monterey auction with all the high-end cars. And you've seen the culmination of that strategy now with what took place at Kissimmee this last January. That doesn't mean we're abandoning Monterey. We're still going to do what we do and what everybody else does in Monterey. But we are building Kissimmee not only to be a high-volume auction, not only to be American muscle cars, but now very high price tag cars, and a lot of the exotics, as you saw with the Bachmann collection, as you saw with the 250 GTO. But again, aside from those, there were a lot of other very high value cars that went to Kissimmee. We sold 54 cars over $1 million in Kissimmee this year.
Dave, I mean, you in your CEO role, and Dana Mecum have certainly hit it out of the park with this auction. So I got to get this Blue Ocean Strategy book. But I wanted to ask specifically about the Enzo. I never knew I wanted an Enzo so bad until one sold for $18 million. And what do you tell people about the buyer? Like, who bought this car? I've heard so many theories about what drove the price up. Maybe a guy who already owned 6 was adding a 7th. Maybe it was a couple billionaires sitting next to each other that wanted to have the lowest mile yellow Enzo out there. How transparent can you be in this business?
Well, we don't name names. We let buyers tell people that they bought certain cars if they in fact choose to do that. We're not in the business of exposing who the buyers are. In particular, we don't know if they want to be anonymous or not. But I think we had 3 very spirited buyers that were bidding on that car, and obviously they all had the capacity to be able to buy the car for what it would take. But it starts with the car. I mean, again, we had a lot of unicorns in that Bachmann collection that brought exorbitant prices. And when you look at the yellow Enzo, the Giallo Modena, 649 miles, one of 11 cars, same owner since new. I mean, it had everything that you're looking for as an investment type collector. And I heard, as you were talking earlier with Hannah, that the market for high value cars, for cars with great provenance, with great histories, with low miles, cars that have been very well taken care of, cars that maybe have one owner, there's a very strong market for those cars. The buyers in the market today are not only collectors, but they're investors, and they're looking for quality investments, quality vehicles that they can invest in. And I think this, when you think about collector cars, that Enzo is pretty much top of the list.
Dave, just kind of quickly, what sort of KYC do you do? Because I know the auction world for art, for example, had been rife with people who had gotten money through unsavory ways, looking at ways to store, to hide, to save that money. Considering there is some anonymity in car auctions too, what sort of things do you do to prevent those sorts of actions from taking place?
Well, as you might imagine, when we have people that are bidding on cars like the Enzo, bidding on cars like the 250 GTO, and a whole host of others that were sold at Kissimmee, we pretty much know those buyers. We know who they are. Sometimes we don't. We do have a vetting process that we go through as part of the bidder registration process. That I would say it's not foolproof, but we have very little instance of shenanigans, if you will, going on in the purchase market of collector cars.
Does everybody pony up, Dave? I mean, are you at liberty to say whether the buyer of the yellow Enzo actually paid for it already?
Yes, the cars have been paid for. That is correct. We have, coming out of Kissimmee, if you would imagine, we offered 4,300 cars. We sold 80% of them, and I have less than one hand of vehicles that haven't been paid for, and most of those are $50,000 cars and $25,000 cars. So there's, for the most part, everything that was monumentally significant was paid for pretty much immediately after the auction.